Hey BookTube, this is take two. I have some music playing in the background in case you're trying to figure out what the hell that is. um, so, I did this already about an hour ago, and when I came back, there was no video, and it's not on my computer. But I've already did a video about that. You guys know that. All right. So, let's get started. What is your beef with Stephen King? Wait, first off, really want to thank you guys for sending me questions. Um, when you do something like this, it's really scary because you don't know if anyone's going to send you any questions. And, like, that would be, like, the worst thing ever. If, like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do an AMA, send me some questions, and nothing comes. And then you're like, maybe I shouldn't do these anymore. But, you guys were great. So, here we go. What is your beef with Stephen King? I don't think it's a beef as much as, well, Jesus Christ, I can never answer this question just straight. Basically, I feel like he's a paper salesman more than a writer. And and I'll get to that, I guess, in a second, but it's kind of like his concepts are great, his execution is poor. He takes a story that could be told in 10 or 15,000 words and makes it 150,000 words, and then litters it with bad sex and a character that also happens to be a writer. I like the movies that are made off of his stuff. I like that a lot more than I like his books. They're just painful to read for me. But I know some people like swear by him, and that's cool. Like, I completely am okay with that. Um, I guess I'm just kind of impatient, and being someone who has had to pad screenplays in the past, like, you could almost like feel when an author's padding his book with just shit that doesn't matter. And it would be one thing if the shit that didn't matter was really interesting, but it usually isn't. So I've tried a lot of stuff by this guy, and just have not been happy with what I ended up with. If I chose 3 books out of every book I read, what would they be? It would be Frankenstein, Breakfast of Champions, and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Those are just my favorite books, hands down. Can you tell us about the area you live in? I live in Big Bear, California. It's in Southern California, in the mountains. We're about 7,000 feet up. I used to live in North Hollywood, in the San Fernando Valley, and it was just too hectic there, and I just couldn't handle it. So Zoe and I thought this would be a nice change of pace, and I think she felt it was going to seem more like England, but it probably does. There's a huge lake, so during the summer, there's tourists here all summer doing lake stuff, and the ski runs open today, so it is now ski season, and so every weekend is going to be hell on earth until like May, so that's great. But yeah, so like I don't know, like I like it here, but last winter's when I hurt my back, and I had to watch Zoe shovel the driveway. We had like the worst winter in like 25 years or something like that. We had like 7 feet in 1 month, and it was just it was rough. And I said it last year. If there's another winter like that, that's going to be our last winter there. So if this winter is anything like last year, I don't know if I could do this. I think we're going back to the beach or something. Uh, where's Zoe from in the UK? Zoe is from Durham County, or County Durham. I think that's how it's said. I believe she was raised in Staindrop, and when I met her, she was living in Barnard Castle, and she went to university at Sunderland and got a degree in environmental biology. She was also in the Durham Youth Orchestra, so don't fuck with her because she's pretty legit. Okay, kind of hardcore. Um, Favorite book I've read this year is probably At the Earth's Core by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and mainly because it got me into Edgar Rice Burroughs. Um, but the best ending to a book I've read this year was Gods of Mars, also by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Um, what is your favorite serial you've written? It would have to be Black Star Canyon. I started putting that together when well, in like 99 or 2000, and it didn't come out. I didn't actually write it until 2013. And it's a, like, if you look at it as novels, it's a 5 novel set. Um, but Black Star Canyon is an actual place that is in Orange County, where I grew up, and all the older kids would always tell the younger kids stories about all the weird ghost shit and satanic cults and um, people going missing and shit about Black Star Canyon. So ever since I was a kid, Black Star Canyon has been this like weird, um, almost mythical place where horrible things happen. So getting to write a book about it, or 5 books about it, um, was really a lot of fun for me. I don't think it is the best. Like, I feel like the stuff I'm working on now is going to be my favorite serials and the best stuff I've worked on. But up until now, Black Star Canyon for sure has been the best thing I've done. What is your favorite horror movie? My go-to for this used to be Bride of Frankenstein, Psycho, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um, any of those would be fine. But the movie that made me get into like wanting to write scripts and stuff like that, or write horror, was a movie. It was a German film called Funny Games. They did a American version of it that had like Naomi Watts and Tim Roth in it, by the same director, but I still think the German one's better. But something happens, and I'm not gonna spoil it because it's like the best thing in the movie. Something happens in the film that made me, as a viewer, feel like violated, and I felt like I was taken advantage of. Um, and the fact that someone made me feel like that with a story um, blew my mind. And that's when I was like, I have to make people feel like that. Like, I have to do this. Um, so that is kind of up there as far as like my favorites. Um, who is your favorite superhero? This is hard because Batman isn't a superhero. He's just an awesome dude. And so I can't say Batman. Um, so I guess it would be Spider-Man from like 81 to 2000, let's say. Um, yeah, we'll stick with that. Supervillain, the Joker. Like, the Joker. I've loved every iteration of the Joker. And now that it's been revealed that there are really three Jokers, the mind boggles. So until that gets straightened out, yeah. What are your thoughts on He-Man? Well, He-Man is um, how I got into bowl cuts and furry underwear. So, um, obviously, a very huge impact on my childhood. But for those of you who don't know, Masters of the Universe was a toy line by Mattel in the early 80s that basically was a way to cash in on the success of like Conan the Barbarian. Um, so they wanted to have their own barbarian, and they named this barbarian He-Man. Um, and the action figures came with. It was originally like storybooks as opposed to like the comics that ended up coming out later. But the storybooks explained who the characters were and what their relationship to everyone was, and made it to where you're like you could like, oh, I could get in on this. Like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Um, and originally, and I mean, in the Filmation cartoon that came out like 2 years after the toy line came out, they created Prince Adam, who was like his secret alter ego, or He-Man was Prince Adam's secret alter ego. But originally, He-Man was just this warrior fighting off Skeletor. Um, but by the time the cartoons came out, um, the cartoons were just basically a half-hour long commercial of the toys, and which were great, but they're very flat, even for children's animation, like story-wise. Um, and they were like the hottest selling toys for like 2 years in a row. So Mattel wanted to like try to sink all their teeth into it, and they wanted to attract the little girl market, so they came out with She-Ra, Princess of Power, and that basically destroyed the whole franchise because they put everything into it, and they weren't putting out He-Man cartoons anymore, and it just flopped, and it kind of took the whole thing down with it. The good thing that came out of She-Ra was the Evil Horde, which was a great villain crew. That was awesome. So after all that went down, a couple years later, they tried to do this He-Man in space thing, which was utter crap. Still kind of fun, but it wasn't He-Man. And then in the early 2000s, Cartoon Network did a reimagining of He-Man, which was actually pretty well done, just on the story angle of it. So, me and He-Man go way back. Do you like James Bond? If yes, do you prefer the films or the original books? Here's the deal. I love mid-century modern architecture, interior design, clothes. like on women, the hairstyles, the makeup, like the 60s look, um, and how the 60s thought the future would look like. Um, it's just like my favorite looking period. And the Sean Connery James Bond movies came around that. And so those are always going to be my favorite. Just like the original Star Trek is always going to be my favorite Star Trek. There's just something about that look that can't be matched. You know, it was such a unique period of time. And not the hippie shit. I'm talking about like the classy shit. Um, but the books are very, very British, and you have to really enjoy that kind of snooty British storytelling. And if you like Victorian classic fiction and stuff like that, then you're fine. But if you're not a huge fan of that, or you're not used to it, I think the James Bond books are a bit hard to swallow. But the Sean Connery James Bond movies is one of the only times where something I like, I'll say that the movies are better than the book. Um, have you started reading the original Conan stories by Robert E. Howard? If so, what do you think of them? Yes, I have. I have read Red Nails, The Queen of the Black Coast, Shadows of something. I can't remember what that one was called. Whoa, hey, you guys. Oh, um, hey, Fred. Um, but what I think is that I don't like the fact that even though it's told in third person, I feel like whenever we see anything Conan does, it's almost like it's through the eyes of a character that's going to die in the next paragraph or so. So that's kind of annoying. And I have a feeling that they will get better because I've heard that the early Howard Conan stories are very rough around the edges. But I almost have a feeling that shh, eat your food. Eat your food. No, go eat your food. Go outside. Um, I have a feeling that the when Tor kind of took over and started getting like a bunch of different people writing Conan books, I have a feeling that those books are going to probably be better stories. Um, like as far as putting them together and stuff. So if you've read any of those Tor Conan books, let me know like which ones are really amazing because I want to finish all the Robert Howard stuff, but I do want to get into those. I think because the premise is amazing, but and the descriptions are great. I just feel like when you can't like be with the protagonist of a story and you're just kind of like seeing the protagonist through other people's eyes, it kind of doesn't feel like you're immersed in it. It feels like you're just kind of along for the ride. How did you meet your wife? We met because I was in this band called Creeperson that was like a horror punk, rock and roll kind of band or whatever. And one of the bands that we had been on a couple compilation albums with is called Die Monster Die. They're like one of my favorite horror punk bands ever. And their drummer Shane Diablo does a podcast with Mike Cadaver called Corpse Cast. and they review an album and a film every show, or at least they used to. I don't know what the format is now. They've been doing a lot of live shows, um, but Shane told me that they were gonna review the first Creeperson album, Rise of Creeperson, and so I checked the show out because I never heard a podcast before, and which is so sad, but it's the truth. So it didn't get the greatest review in the world, but me and Mike ended up becoming really good buds and stuff, so that was cool. But Corpse Cast has a Facebook group where all the people who listen to the show and call in, like, mingle or whatever. But people could call in and leave messages, and usually how they do it, they leave a message of the show from the week before. So the next week, I listened to the show again, and I heard this lovely British accent, and I'm like, ooh, she sounds pretty. And immediately stalked her on the Facebook group. And because of some little funny thread that her and a couple other girls had started, which I'm not going to get into, I saw my in, and so like I messaged her, and I'm like, hey, dooba-doo. And we just started talking every day, and within like a month, she had flown out, and that's kind of how that worked. What kind of books does she like to read? She usually goes for horror-ish type stories. Typically period pieces, like historical fiction, but in like Victorian England or London and stuff. But lately, she has been reading a lot of historical American fiction, like set in America and stuff, which is really weird because that's not what she typically goes for. So that's kind of strange. Why the name Paperback Junkie? Well, I wanted to do a channel about like vintage paperbacks. Because that's what I was into and still am into. And the reason why it's called Junkie is because when I started the channel, I was reading the book Junkie by William S. Burroughs. And I felt like that term is very much like how I've been. Like, when I go into like a used bookstore, there's like no stopping me. It's like, you fuckers let me in, now you gotta deal with it. Like, it's like a mess. And that's why Junkie is spelt with a Y in Paperback Junkie, because that's how it's spelled with the Burroughs book instead of the IE. I think one edition it's spelled IE, but Junkie with a Y is how it's spelled on most editions. Where do you like to read? Earth. I've read every book I've ever read there. As the tick says, it's where I keep all my stuff. But honestly, like, I could read anywhere because once I start reading, I'm gone. Like, I'm in another place. So it kind of doesn't matter where I read. Favorite Batman bad guy? I already said Joker, so let me try to come up with a different one. God, I did this already and I forgot who I said. I like Man-Bat, and Bane's pretty cool, but if you watch Gotham, the portrayal of the Penguin on Gotham is amazing. And the Penguin has always been, at least to me, such a shit character. And the Penguin on Gotham is like top notch, like just amazing. Uh, One of your favorite comics is, um, well, the comics like that I'm like hardcore collecting right now are Batman and Detective Comics, um, and Red Hood and the Outlaws. Again, I don't like the Outlaws as much as I just like Red Hood. And I think a lot of that is because I kind of had something to do with his Jason Todd's death in the 80s. Um, so I've always felt a little guilty about that. But the Red Hood character, I think, could be like so powerful. It's such a awesome idea. Um, for those of you who don't know, the way originally Red Hood and the Outlaws was kind of shit. It had Starfire and Arsenal, and I didn't really see that team as a like. It just felt weird. But since they've done Rebirth, the Outlaw team is Red Hood, Artemis, who is a Amazon like Wonder Woman, and Bizarro. So it's pretty cool, and it's kind of supposed to be like the evil reflection of Trinity, like the Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman team. So it's kind of neat. But I would like to see just like a straight up Red Hood title. Um, but it's okay. And like Gotham City Garage is actually pretty good right now. Moon Knight's good right now. Batman White Knight is really good right now. So that's kind of what I'm jamming on. What is the first book you published? The first book I published was a book called Bloodlust Romance that was like a exploitation horror, kind of surreal thing. And I is it just World of Myth? The company that put it out did a magazine called World of Myth and Erotica, and maybe it was just called World of Myth Publications. I don't know. I can't think of the name of the company. Might just be World of Myth. But yeah, so that was the first book that I had published or got published. Because when I was writing, self-publishing was not cool the way it is now. Like, there weren't ebooks. Oh my gosh. Hey, Fred. How's it going, buddy? What you doing over there? I'm gonna have to give him bones. Sorry about that. They know I'm a sucker, and if they bug me long enough, I'll give them something. Yeah. Oh yeah, publishing. Most people did vanity paperbacks, and if you didn't do that, you could make a PDF of your book and send that to people, and that was like the ebook. Actually, and this is like 2006, 2005, 2006. There was also people just doing text files, which is just ugly. It was so bad. Whew. Oh, but I self-published a book of poetry called The Legend of Cartwayne Twain and Other Poems or whatever. And The Legend of Cartwayne Twain is like a story in verse in like 5 chapters or whatever. So that was pretty cool. I put that out myself after Bloodlust Romance got published. When did you and Zoe meet? We started talking in February 2013, and we met in March. Like, we met in person. Can you tell us something about yourself, your life, that not many people are aware of, but you wish they were? Music has always been a big part of my life. I've been in and out of bands since I was like 13. And as soon as I got cable and saw a video on MTV, I was like, I saw Nikki Sixx in the Kickstart My Heart video, and I'm like, I need a bass guitar stat. Like, hello. And from that, listening to like early 80s, like late 70s, early 80s LA punk, like Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Bad Religion, X. That was like my life, you know, like so many, like it was like Social Distortion, like these bands, like they were from where I was at, and like, but at that time, it was before all the bands started getting back together to do like reunion shit and all that stuff. So it was like, it wasn't cool yet to like those old bands, you know. It was still like, ugh. But a lot of the people, when I would go to shows, or when my band, the first band I was in that started playing clubs, I was like 14. I was meeting people who had either been roadies for, or used to go to the shows all the time, of these bands that I loved. And so I just got to hear like all of these great stories about like crazy shit that went down. The Germs, that's another band that I was super into. So like that was like a huge thing for me. And then like Nirvana happened, which was great. Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking shit on that. And then all those bands that I had liked were like getting back together and doing like, if they weren't doing like a reunion tour, they were at least like putting out a new album and doing like local shows or something. And usually those albums were fucking awful, but it was really cool to like be able to see the bands that I never thought I'd see. Like right now, the original lineup of the Misfits are back together and touring. Well, they're going to be out here at the end of December, out at the end of this month. And the tickets are a bit pricey, but it's like, fucking hell, I never thought that would happen, you know? So that's pretty nuts. But what I'm trying to get at is, I really, really, really miss performing. Like, I still write music and record music, and I've done different kinds of bands, you know. But, like, especially, like, when I was in high school, like, I learned how to play every instrument I could get a hold of. So, guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, loosely keyboard, harmonica, mandolin, like, whatever I could grab, I would learn, so I could be in as many different bands at once as I can. So there would be shows we would play where there would be like 8 bands on the bill, and I was in like 6 of the bands that were playing. And I would play drums for one band, guitar for another band, sing for another band, bass in another band. And it was just like that was just what I did for years. Like, from the time I was able to, like, stay out past the streetlights coming on, you know, um, that's what I was doing. And pretty much haven't looked back, I guess. But I just miss, and like, Creeperson wasn't doing a whole lot when we moved up here. Like, we had just finished recording, um, like, the demo recordings of the new album we were going to put out that never came out. And so, like, after we were here for a little bit, I'm like, dude, I really want to start playing. So, like, last year, I did some, like, solo acoustic stuff. Did some shows, then went on a little tour across the country from, like, here to Minnesota down to Texas and back over. And that was really fun, but, like, the energy wasn't the same, you know, because it was like an acoustic tour. So I just, like, I really, really miss it. So anyway, let me see. Have you ever been to a foreign country? Yes. I was in Amman, Jordan for 3 months, building, like, a youth hostel for kids who got kicked out of their house because they weren't Muslim or weren't believing in being Muslim. I've been all through Europe, but I've never been to England. That's funny. I've never been to the UK, but, like, I've been to, like, Amsterdam, Germany, Austria, Turkey, Switzerland. Yeah, and I've been to Mexico a ton because Mexico's like 2.5 hours from where I grew up. And so me and my friends, like, in high school, we just drive to Tijuana to get, like, fucked up and shit and get drunk and stuff because you could drink down there. Really, there's no, like, laws. And my buddy would go down there to get, like, prescription pills because you don't need a prescription down there. You just go to the drugstore and say, give me a bunch of fucking Vicodin or something. But I could tell you stories that would make your head spin about some of the shit that I've seen in Tijuana and that have happened to us in Tijuana. But yeah, as soon as I was 21, there was no fucking need to go back to Mexico, so I haven't been back since. Shoe size, like 12-ish. Some brands of shoes I have to do like a 13, but 12 is usually it. Favorite band from the 60s. This is hard because I was thinking about it, and, like, of course there's the Rolling Stones, and yeah. But all the bands that I really dig from the 60s, like the Stooges, MC5, David Bowie, Neil Young, they either all put out their first albums in 69, or, like, Black Sabbath, who formed in the 60s, but their first album didn't come out until the 70s. So that's a pretty tricky thing. But it's really weird that, like, most of the 60s stuff I like was, like, 68, 69. That's really kind of bizarre. What is your favorite Saturday Night Fever song? Staying Alive is everyone's favorite Saturday Night Fever song. How dare you? Describe a usual day for yourself. When you wake up, read, write. I usually get up a little before 6 to make sure my daughter goes to school. She's a freshman in high school, 14 years old. And then if I'm working on a project, like if I'm writing a book or whatever, and I should do this every day, but I don't. And like I go through periods where like I'll write every day for like months, and then like I won't write for like a week, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Um, but I would typically get up, and as soon as Shaylee goes to school, I write till noon. Um, but when I'm like plotting and like putting together a project, I'll do that in that period as well. And like for the like last week, I was working on this cozy mystery for a short story magazine kind of thing. And then this week, I been working on this kind of fantasy thing that I think I'm over plotting it, to be honest. So that's kind of annoying me. But if I'm not doing that, I read as soon as Shaylee leaves. And I'll just like read usually until Zoe gets up. And then basically it's just like doing shit around the house, doing errands, being everybody's taxi. Uh, and then if I have free moments, I either listen to music or play like Atari 2600 or Nintendo NES, like Legend of Zelda, Mega Man. Those are my jams. The first Legend of Zelda game is like my favorite game ever. And for some reason, I don't listen to music and play video games at the same time. I used to when I was younger, but I just realized that I don't do that. It's very strange. But yeah, and then after dinner and after Shaylee is in her room for the night, me and Zoe watch BookTube until I fall asleep. That's usually how everything goes. Wanted to ask about horror novels you enjoy and would recommend. I like the classics. That's what I got into originally. And a lot of that is because all the like Universal monster movies and stuff, they would come on the weekends all the time. And we had like Elvira and like horror hosts and stuff like that. And so I mean they would usually show crap, but every once in a while you would get like a Frankenstein movie or something. So like Frankenstein, Dracula, Invisible Man, Phantom of the Opera, Jekyll and Hyde. Those were always like my go-to. That's how I got into everything. Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland. My dad had a bunch of like original issues when they started up again in the 90s. I subscribed and got every issue. I have a tattoo of Vamp Girl from the Captain Company order forms and stuff, which is hysterical. But just like classic black and white monster movies got me into reading like gothic horror and like all the Vincent Price, Roger Corman, AIP flicks. Yeah, those are great. So that got me into reading those classics, and but for like more modern horror, I would say like I just read them this year, but the James Herbert Rats books are so good. There's 3 books and then a graphic novel. They're amazing. Definitely check those out if you haven't yet. Oh, and this is the last question. What are some of your favorite Star Trek novels? Okay. Um, the f- the that's not really true. The first Star Trek novels that I started reading were um, the novelizations of the television shows that James Blish did. Um, so those are cool, but it's just like rewatching a show you know. Um, so like Spock Must Die and Spock Messiah, those books are great. Like I really enjoyed those a lot. Um, but some odd ones that are really fun because unless you're like super hardcore, I don't think people like even give this any credit, but there are the Star Trek log books, like Star Trek Log 1, Star Trek Log 2. And those are novelizations of the animated series from the 70s of Star Trek. And so, like, they're kind of weird that, like, they even exist, but they're kind of fun. They look great. Um, those are pretty awesome. But yeah, like, the original series is, like, my favorite. So, um, if you don't like the original series very much, I am absolutely no help to you when it comes to your favorite Star Trek novels. So, that is it. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for sending in the questions because I wasn't sure there would be any. And this video is 10 minutes shorter than the one I did before. Um, and some of my answers were different, which is weird. But having an extra time to process information, I guess. I might be back today, I might not. But the truth is out there, so find it, I guess. And yeah, I again thank you guys so much, and thank you new subscribers for subscribing. If this is something that you liked, like just hearing me talk about life and shit that I'm into, let me know, and I might do more of this kind of format, whether it's questions or me just talking. If that is something you're interested in. If you're not, I won't do it. But if anyone's kind of digging it, then I could definitely do this tons. So thank you again. I can't thank you enough. And I hope to hear from you all soon down there. So bye bye.